name is Catherine Grayson Nance, and I am super excited and honored to be able to moderate the Neurodiversity in Tech panel today here at DevReach. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you guys to kind of go down the line and each introduce yourselves so that we know who we're talking to today.
Sounds good. Hi, I'm Katie Kulikowski, and I serve as Chief People Officer for Progress.
That's a fancy job title. I'm Liz Carter. I'm a developer advocate at MongoDB and a very proud Microsoft MVP in my spare time.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, I don't need to give you a microphone,
Alyssa Nichol. I am a DevRel at Progress and an Angular GDE, and I'm also getting into the .NET space.
Chris DeMars, Senior UI Engineer at Rocket Mortgage, also a GDE, MVP, multiple things.
Hi everyone, Shirley Knowles. I am the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Progress.
So today we're going to go ahead and start off just by talking a little bit about some definitions, kind of making sure that we're all on the same page so that we can come to this conversation with a good base understanding. So first, let's talk a little bit about what neurodiversity actually is. The definition that we have here is that neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many different ways, that there is no right way of thinking, learning, and behaving, and the differences are not viewed as deficits. Neurodiversity includes any conditions that are caused by neurological issues, kind of the way that the brain is wired. Is there anything that you guys would add to that definition?
I think one of you lovely ladies had the idea of also giving some examples. Who was it? Was it you? Was it you? Was it you? I'm putting you on the spot.
Matters not who. Matters not who.
Put you on blast.
Well, and our thought was maybe to put that question back out to the audience, if you can think of examples that first come to mind. We're not going to build an exhaustive list by any means, but maybe when you think of the word neurodiversity under that umbrella of a definition, what are the first sort of traits that might pop into your mind? Anyone care to venture an answer, or we can do it here if you.
Anybody?
Yeah, just holler them out popcorn style.
We're in a safe space. You can do this.
Different thought patterns.
Yep.
Like what?
I just was afraid to speak up.
We couldn't tell by.
I love you. I love you.
We couldn't tell by where you are in the room at all.
For folks that might be watching online, he is in the very back row, carefully positioned by the door to make a quick exit.
It's locked. You're going.
You gotta come to this door, bro.
Exactly. I saw a hand go up though.
So yesterday I attended a workshop by Jennifer, and we did this exercise where the result was you answered a few questions and the result was your type of box, and we were matched between people. So I figured that's a form of neurodiversity because it's like a personality test that leads to something, and sort of determines what type of person you are. I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Sounds like that was definitely based on. Jed.
So the word neurodiversity, I mean, I split it into the two words, and I think it means just that.
Sorry, I want to be inclusive of our virtual audience, and they can't hear you all, so let's do this.
I was just saying that the word neurodiversity means exactly that, different ways of thinking. But when I think about this, when I read the definition, it is the output of that. So then there's different ways of communicating, which might be where the real differences come in, because neurodiversity, while it's different ways of thinking, we can't see inside what's going on. It's the communication that then comes out in the way we process that different thinking. That's what I thought of when I read that definition.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else while I'm here?
You sure it's really fun to play with the mics? If you just want to play with the mics, that's okay too. Wait, have I been holding this a really long time? I just
I know. Getting to play with the microphones is the only way they get me to give any talks. So.
Do we need to testing, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. There we go, we've done it now.
Nice, okay. Well, moving along then, let's talk a little bit about mental illness and what the difference might be there. So the definition of mental illness, psychological disorders such as anxiety or mood disorders, personality disorders, Rather than being defined by traits in the way that neurological disorders are, psychological disorders are more often defined by symptoms, behaviors, or emotions. Is that a difference that you guys have kind of felt, or what do you think is the most important part of the two different words to kind of take away? Because I do think they get lumped together quite often.
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely a difference. I think sometimes there's overlap where mental health you can get the mental illness label when it's actually a neurodiversity condition that's not been diagnosed, or having a neurodiverse condition ends up leading to mental health problems from a lack of support or treatment. But they are definitely caused by different things, and they are a different group of things, but they often, like you say, get lumped together, and especially in tech, I think, because there's quite a lot of overlap of shared experiences.
Yeah, I would agree. Me and a friend of mine, we actually do a talk on mental illness, accessibility, and neurodiversity. And they kind of, if you look at a big Venn diagram, which there's an amazing graphic out there, if you look at all three different worlds, they all interact and like intertwine with each other. When you talk about mental illness, you have anxiety disorders. I myself suffer from debilitating health anxiety mixed with obsessive compulsive disorder. I've been diagnosed. I'm currently taking medication for that. I see health anxiety specialists. It all kind of intertwines with web accessibility, because I built my career on speaking about web accessibility. I'm here speaking about accessibility. And then you get that into the neurodivergence piece, because there's multiple things that make that up. So they kind of all go hand in hand. And with that, talking about that, I just want to drop this real quick. If you are taking pictures and you're tweeting about them, please add alt text to anything that you put out there. Because for me personally, in the accessibility space, if I'm tagged in something, I won't be able to do anything with that image. So please, if you can, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Speaking of graphics, I believe this was the one that you were mentioning. You swapped over to the alt text real quick. I didn't want to interrupt you because that was a really important message. But I believe we do have that graphic here. So just to give folks kind of an idea, trying not to turn away from my mic as I gesture, give folks an idea of what this kind of looks like. So as we go through this panel, I just want to let you guys know we've got a couple questions that we have already put aside, but if you have any, definitely feel free, raise your hand, jump in. We really want this to be as interactive as possible. So that being said, let's kind of start off with a good opening question. What does neurodiversity and mental health mean to you? Broad stroke, but.
So for me, I was really excited to put together this panel. I'd personally had conversations with both Luce and with Chris naturally on hallway tracks or online after different sessions and things that we'd done together. And it came up because I am diagnosed with adult ADHD, a very severe case. And most of the time, I'm not medicated. When I'm developing, I try to be. But we can get into the whys later, but I just prefer not to be. And so talking with people who are developers or who are speakers or in this industry has been really neat to hear their stories. And so I thought it would be great to bring this on stage, because often when I stream, I'll get comments of, oh my goodness, we're all over the place today. And I, on the last stream I did, I think it was a week and a half ago, I was like, oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm just not taking Ritalin right now, or I'm not taking Adderall right now. I'm choosing not to. And the stream chat got quiet, and one person was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, there is absolutely nothing to apologize. And in fact, this is something I want to talk about more, because I was shamed a little bit for this in college by a professor. I was called out for it. And ever since then, it was a difficult thing. And I don't think it should be. I think it's something that, whether or not it's an anxiety disorder, ADHD, I mean, the list goes on. I just think it should be something we're allowed to talk about and that we don't feel the need to say I'm sorry about. So, yeah.
Well said.
Oh no. We're moving into a space. Right? We're talking about mental health issues, or neurodiversity is becoming more and more the norm. Something, as you said, it's nothing to be ashamed about. It's just who you are as an individual. And I think, in my role, and just as me as a person, I want people to feel comfortable being who they authentically are. It's not something to necessarily be ashamed of or something to hide, but it's opening up, right? I was talking to Jen earlier about how some people may be dyslexic, and they want to hide that because now they feel as though they're at a disadvantage. But if you're not talking about it, or if someone's not trying to learn more about dyslexia, and you keep switching words or numbers around, and people don't know why, all of a sudden you're dinged for it instead of someone understanding this is just what, this is you, and we can work through it. So I think being able to talk to others and not say I'm sorry, but just say, oh, okay, cool. And just moving on and making it more of a normal thing is really important, and will help to move the discussion around these areas, move it forward for many people.
So I think about this in really similar ways, but I think that as we look to the future and what we're trying to build within the teams that we're a part of, I think enablement of diverse ways of thinking is something that is just sort of gaining importance at a really, really fast pace. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the world is changing really rapidly. I think we've come through a really acute time of intensive change, and I think that that's bringing out people's natural strengths and a different expectation of how they're able to come to work. And so I think making it an important topic to discuss and consider is going to be a differentiator for how well people are able to thrive in the jobs that they're in, how well they're able to team or be good teammates to the people who are on their teams. And that's really the nature of our work today, right? Is like how well are we doing those things? For me personally, I learn a lot from my family all the time. I think we represent like half of the things on that Venn diagram amongst us. So one of my children is like relatively new in her journey with ADHD, and it wasn't until I was sort of as a mother caring for her and how she shows up at school. She also has dyscalculia, like how she was learning those things that I learned a lot more about myself. And I think our kids often do that to us. If you have kids or your loved ones, whoever they might be, anytime, we have a natural tendency to have a much higher degree of empathy for those people, right? The people we live with and love. And so it was a really great opportunity of self-discovery for myself and where I struggle, and also where I hyper-focus, right? And I had this epiphany as I was watching my daughter learn a little bit more about some of her differences, that I think I went into HR because what I tend to hyper-focus on is people. So I will catch the subtle expression that's made in the back corner of the room, but I also might miss a whole bunch of other things along the way. And so I love working with people around me who have different abilities and different strengths that they bring to. And I think that's where I've been in tech for almost 25 years, and I think I naturally gravitated toward tech because maybe not everybody has the same strengths that I do, and I was able to carve out a niche for myself in ways that I was able to augment some of the sort of natural profiles that come into this industry. So that's the piece of the neurodiversity, but I think when it comes to mental health, and Shirley and I spent many hours yesterday in a forum in which we had the honor and pleasure of talking about some of these topics, not specifically this, but diversity and inclusion and enablement. When it comes to the mental health component, I think that the duty of care of an organization for both the individual and the collective has changed a lot in the last couple of years. And the expectation of people for what their companies are going to provide for them or how they're going to support and enable them has changed. And it's not done. I actually think we're at the very, very beginning of this voyage. And so I've been doing this a long time, and I've never had as many people who have come to me and said, I am burnt out, or I am deeply depressed right now, or I have lost my sense of community, or I am struggling with anxiety, or I could go on and give you a list of 20 things. So the acuteness of this challenge and the mental health component of it, I think, is different than it's ever been before. So even opening up conversation to have here, I think, is a great step to sort of widen the aperture of how we're going to solve for it in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'd agree with what's been said. Like for me, I've got dyspraxia, I've got ADHD, I've unofficially been told, hey, I can't officially write this on paper for you right now because this isn't what you're here for, but pretty sure you have Asperger's. And so all these things have overlapped and caused different areas in my life, and I've learned a lot more about myself from other people. And actually, you know, a lot of my conditions, for example, make problem solving difficult. So believe it or not, being a developer is really hard for me. And so I end up with really bad imposter syndrome, and I have confidence crises. And the amount of conversations and valuable things I've learned or people I've met from just being open about it. So I think the more we can talk about it, the better, because I think, imposter syndrome is a very specific niche experience. It's not necessarily a mental illness, but a lot of the time it can lead to or be linked to things like depression or anxiety. And so the more we can be open about things, the better.
#normalize mental health.
Yes. You guys have actually done an impressive job of answering the next question that we had lined up.
You don't wait for questions.
You really don't. You anticipated quite well about how neurodiversity or mental health has impacted you personally.
I mean, we can get way more personal than that.
Yeah.
I'm speaking pretty high level.
Right, and
Well,
I
then
can
please,
even
yeah,
say,
let's take it.
from the, looking at it personally, and Katie kind of alluded to this in her role, but even in my role, to have people come up and say the things like, I'm burnt out, I'm really anxious, I'm depressed. Since the pandemic, those type of comments have gone through the roof, right? And it's not as though people weren't feeling these emotions and these feelings and experiencing this before. But now it's like you're, as the phrase goes, you're burning the candle on both ends, and you're trying to manage your personal life, your professional life. You have dogs running around, barking in the background. You may have kids at home. You have parents that you're trying to take care of. You're trying to take care of yourself. And even...
And that's just one 30-minute call that we had earlier.
And it's like, and it becomes heavy, And just to be able to create a community, to be on a team where your leader or your colleagues are open to saying, well, tell me about it. How can I help you? I had a friend that was going through a really hard time, and she said that her manager sent groceries to her house, right? And because she wasn't grocery shopping for herself. It was a really big deal. These small things that you learn about others and then you take action makes all the difference. So I think from the mental health side, just, people, right? And maybe I say that, maybe I'm a little biased in that because it's my job to know people. But I think for many of you out here, the folks that you work with, and when things start to seem a little off, it's always important to just check in, how are you, to not be afraid to do that, because I think 20 years ago, there was a time where you wouldn't do that. You're just there to do the job and leave.
Yeah, so for me, it's personal. So I got two stories. One is just an everyday thing for me, and the other one is every now and then it's hit or miss. But I have debilitating health anxiety, accompanied with OCD. And if you were in my inner circle, you know my struggle on the daily. And it gets vulnerable. Talking about this, which I'm cool with talking about it, I get super vulnerable. I feel vulnerable, but it's cool. I wake up every day thinking I'm going to die of a terminal disease. I've taken multiple medications to help that. I've seen OCD specialists. And this is health anxiety. You might know it as hypochondria. You might know it as illness symptomatic disorder. The DSM has multiple different versions of this. Today, it's health anxiety. There's a couple other different versions of it depending on what health anxiety books you read. But I wake up every day thinking I'm going to die. The only solace I get is when I'm sleeping, and I love to sleep. Right? It's a escape for me, and it revolves around one terminal illness, and that's the only thing it revolves around. I could get anything else in the world, and I'd be like, I'll kick ass with that, but it's just one. Every sensation. Lump, bump, bodily sensation in my body means that this is what I have. I will go see the doctor once a month. I will have multiple blood tests done, and nothing works. I'll be good for a month. That's my life. That's my life. And it's hard to concentrate at work. I constantly seek reassurance from friends. It sucks. That's how it affects me personally. But the second story I also have a little bit of harm anxiety. You might have all heard of general anxiety disorder, right? There's multiple facets of anxiety disorders. There are health anxiety, there's harm anxiety, there's 3 or 4 different other types. And I moved to Denver back in 2019. I'm from Detroit, moved to Denver, stayed out there for a year. I'm on my way going through Illinois, and I was going through a little downtown-ish area, and I thought I hit somebody. I didn't think I hit this person until I was an hour down the freeway. And what did I have to do? I had to turn right back around, go back into Illinois, to see if there were cops in ambulances and tape, because I literally thought I hit this person. And my mind couldn't process that. Chris, if you would have hit somebody, you would have felt that. There would have been damage to the vehicle. But no, your brain doesn't work the same logically. So I lost 2 hours of drive time from Detroit to Denver because of my harm anxiety, just to see what happened. And if something did happen, I'd have to turn myself in. I've gone on Twitter and checked news reports because of the harm anxiety. It gets so bad for me. I'll think of something 5 hours later, like, oh, did I do this? Alyssa, if I would have hit somebody, I would have felt that, right? I would have felt it, right?
No, you would. And I'm just honestly, I haven't been nervous for speaking in a long time. And you just really hit. Because this is getting it for me, and I don't know why. Because I was like the one who wanted to do this in the first place. But I think it's just because I have received lashback for being who I am and for sharing who I am, and it's been used against me before, but it shouldn't be. And there's so many, not just women, but people who've come to me and appreciated my story. So I just thank you for sharing your story. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to others. Mine is nowhere near as crushing. It's as overwhelming, perhaps, but not as to the degree. For example, I went up to my room right before this, and I needed to re-glue one of my lashes because it was like falling off my face. And thank you, Sarah, you're so sweet, thank you. With my ADHD, what I mean by severe ADHD is that I took the eyelash off my face and I put glue on it. And about 10 minutes later, I had gone to get ice. I had a drink. I laid on the bed. I was checking my texts, and I was like, oh, the eyelash, the glue. And I tried putting it on my face. It was so dry by then, right? There's no. And so it's things like, my 3-year-old, he comes behind me at home and he closes the fridge door because I'm in the other room and I don't realize it. And my husband will tell me these stories and things. And so it's tough, especially being a developer. Moving to DevRel has been so freeing for me because I get to do development, but I also get to do community and a lot of my strengths. Sarah, God bless her, as she's mentored me, she's told me, she's like, you're not looking at all the strengths that ADHD brings to you. There is hyper-focus that we talk about. People tell me all the time. I had this one guy in the Angular community, he goes, you're a fourth wall breaker. He's like, I constantly look at you and it's like I'm in a movie and you're just breaking me out of it, because you're so animated and you're all over the place. And so I do have this insane passion and this insane energy that comes from it. We think my son might have it, and me and my husband are like, is it a blessing? Is it a curse? I don't know, because there's so many good sides from it too. And so, but thank you for sharing your story. It meant a lot. Yeah.
Guess it's my turn. Wow, okay, this is fun to follow. So for me, I guess it's kind of two things. So the most common story that I talk about openly is the fact that C#, the programming language, saved my life. Because growing up with Asperger's, kids couldn't interact with me. I couldn't interact with them. I was just different. I just got excluded. And so I was just alone, complete loner. I was 7 years old when a teacher told my mum that I have a really black way of looking at things, because I knew in an odd number of people in the class that when a teacher told us all to line up and find a partner to walk to lunch with, I'd be alone. Every day. And so kind of got to teenage years and it turned into bullying, and for a little while I tried boarding school because it looked kind of fun. And then I learned that when you're bullied at boarding school, there is no such thing as going home to your bedroom. You are surrounded by it. And so then there was some mental health problems in my family that that was a little bit rough. So, for me, it wasn't until I was 19 that I discovered programming, and someone took me under their wing and was like, hey, come learn this. So that was amazing. And so at 19 years old, I finally had friends in real life who accepted me and loved me, and ever since then have lifted me up and gone, do you know what? You are different, but that's exactly why we love you. And I love it. But then on the flip side, there's a constant battle every day, because I was diagnosed with ADHD last year, combined type. So I didn't think I had it, because a lot of people, you see that stereotype of ADHD just means that boisterous boy in the class who's misbehaving. Well, it turns out that I have internal hyperactivity. My brain does not switch off. I watch things at night to go to sleep. Otherwise, I'll be awake for hours. But I've been trying medication, different types of medication, Ritalin, Adderall, non-stimulants. I was put on some in the UK as experimental medication in January that made my blood pressure tank to 70/40, and I ended up taking an ambulance ride. So that was a breeze. But kind of alongside the ADHD, the medication hasn't helped. And so I have this constant shame and guilt every day of, damn, I should have finished that. Or if I could just focus, I'd be doing this and I'd be better at my job. And yeah, that shame just weighs on you every day of like, come on, you should be doing so much better. You should have had your book written by now. You could have had 3 blog posts out already from the people that are waiting for it. Like, could have done so many things. And everyone else tells you you're doing great. But that does not take that weight away and that shame every day of, I am just not doing enough. And if I could just focus more, it'd be better. But medication doesn't work. So it's just a hopeless cycle.
Well, we didn't know this when we lined up this way, but my oldest brother, I have 3 older brothers, my oldest brother also has Asperger's. And I think we learned a lot from each other growing up. I was the youngest and he was the oldest, and we have very different ways of interpreting the world and how we show up. And he has a lot of anxiety that goes along with it. And for whatever reason, I used to sort of be the best pairing with him as a sibling, because if he was going off the rails, I would help to refocus him. I had no problem sort of, saying to him like, Rick, look me in the eyes and like, let's connect in this way. And similarly, he would help me sort of look at the world in a really different way. But I think I want to bring this back to a concept of bias, and I'll just share with you how it's impacted me growing up with a brother with Asperger's, and my nephew also is on the spectrum, so we have like a very strong line of it within our family, having different strengths. So my brother took a little bit longer to do some things. He didn't get his driver's license till he was maybe in his 30s, because that was really hard for him to learn. Like, all that stimulation of input was really challenging. And it took him a couple extra years with each cycle of his education. Brilliant guy. When I took the SAT and we get a practice PSAT to come home to, I gave it to him and my mom, and they scored perfect. Like, while they were talking at the kitchen table, I was like, all right, so he's smart. He'll get there. We just have to figure out how to help him get there. So he decided he wanted to pursue a PhD in psychology, and my parents were both therapists, so like there was a lot of it in our family. And he said, I want to go into counseling psychology. Now, and mind you, he had to go to 2 or 3 different programs. He had to switch programs. He had like not great mentors and professors who doubted and challenged him, and it like took a lot of extra support from the family, from that system and that team. But even within the family, we said, Rick, are you sure counseling psychology, like maybe clinical psychology, which the difference would be like you would be alone in a more clinical environment doing research, perhaps. Like, you're an excellent writer. Wouldn't you maybe rather do that than like connect in really human and intimate ways? Because you don't connect in human and intimate ways the way we connect in human and intimate ways, which is like that was our own bias as a family. And we know and love him and are charged with his success. And luckily, he self-advocated very well and said, no, I really feel strongly about going into counseling psychology. And we're like, all right, we are all here to help you. I was a kid at the time, but I've had a battery of tests given to me. I've had all the psychology tests that a psych student would need to give, so I benefited in that way. I've had like more than 50 IQ tests in my life, so like, I was always his guinea pig for all things. But he has gone on, he's now almost 60, and he's gone on to have an incredibly successful career as a counseling psychologist. He's helped thousands and thousands of veterans. That's the niche in which he has chosen to work. And my mom reminds me of this regularly, because they both live in the same city and are practicing therapists in the same city. And she's like, people come up to me all the time who are clients of your brother's, and they say, what a great listener he is. And I'm like, like the same brother we're talking, Rick, that brother? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, because he doesn't give the signs of listening, right? Like, to me, if someone's listening to me, they're making really deep eye contact with me. And at that time, there wasn't as much support to help people like learn these like traditional systems. But maybe we shouldn't have to, right? Maybe we should be widening our aperture and realize that like somebody might be off looking this way, but really listening incredibly intently and digesting what I'm saying, and they might show up a different way. So that's a little bit of a personal story, but again, I think that goes into that widening of how things should be, right? And Shirley and I talk about this a lot because we care a lot about inclusion and diversity within our company, and it's the nature of a lot of the work that we do of being inclusive. But it's not just inclusion for the sake of inclusion. It's inclusion for the sake of widening the perspective that can come in to help solve a problem better than just doing it the same way that we always have. And whether that's world hunger or whether that's a dev problem. I don't think it necessarily matters, right? Like adopting a new behavior around those things is going to be what gets us from here to there, because what got us here isn't what is going to get us there. I heard some really scary statistics yesterday, which, just to give like a little bit more context, that if we have a need for 9 pilots in the future, there's only 1 pilot in training today to become a pilot. And I think the nurse statistic was like worse. It was like, we have a need for 20 nurses in the future and there's only 1 nurse in training. It was like crazy numbers like this. So that alone, if you think of where we are 5, 10, 20 years out, and the shortage of skill set, probably in part because of a narrower path of allowing who should show up and do what jobs, is something we're all going to carry the burden of if we don't do it right.
And I think this is why advocacy, right? Self-advocacy or others advocating for you is so important. Melissa, you mentioned earlier that your 3-year-old may or may not have ADHD, and it can either be a blessing or a curse. And I think looking at it as a blessing, a form of a blessing, is the way to kind of think about it. You had also mentioned how Sarah was advocating for you, right? And helping you recognize all of the greatness that is within you. And I think about so many of you out here who are either neurodivergent, or you may be someone that can advocate for others, and the difference that that can make in someone's life. Your brother was able to advocate for himself, but imagine the brothers out there who just say, you know what, maybe you're right, I don't need to do this. And they go down a different path, and they're not fulfilled. They're not really diving into what they were meant to do in this life. And so that's why I just think it's important to not look at it as something negative, right? But something that's okay, it's different, but we're gonna work with it, right? And all of the greatness that can come out of something that for a very long time, folks just wanted to put in a corner and say, just, you know, you're too busy, go sit down. Why do you keep moving? Why are you all over the place? Now it's like, well, hey, let's use all of that energy for, you know, something that you will excel at.
It makes a huge difference to be able to work somewhere where you know that's the attitude. So I've also got actually anxiety quite severe that I deal with. And those that have access to my progress calendar that are trying to schedule meetings with me will notice that there is always a block every other Wednesday, 1:30 to 2:30, when I am in talk therapy. So, but the ability to just put that on a calendar, many places I have worked before, that was not the case, right? And I was trying to squeeze it into a lunch break or sneak around or come up with an excuse, or, you know, how many vague appointments can you schedule in a month?
It's always a dentist appointment.
Well then, I was going to say, I have worked at a place that really thought I had some dental issues. And yeah, it really makes a huge difference to be able to take what you need and do what you need to be at your best without having to feel like you're sneaking or hiding or squeezing it into your 60 minutes of
Actually,
lunch
on that point, I love that, because there's also a productivity argument here, which is that when people are forced to or forcing themselves to work against their natural style, like their output is going to be incredibly diminished. And it's going to be exhausting at the end of the day too, right? We sometimes talk about like the difference between extroversion and introversion, and that's, you know, not necessarily, maybe it's neurodivergence, maybe it's not, but I think, you know, for the person who is naturally introverted, if they have to network all day long, like they will just go home and pass out. So being like making it okay to talk about what those preferences or those inclinations or, you know, those attributes are, can help us work better together as a team. And I will share this in a more anonymized way because I haven't asked permission to share, but there's a personality type set that you all might be familiar with, the MBTI test. And there's a component of it that is thinking versus feeling. And the feeling stuff is really people-oriented and really squishy. And I've been an executive for, I think, almost 20 years. I stopped counting because I'm old now. But most executives show up as T's. It's very rare that you have an F on the team, right? But if I'm in charge of people programming, like maybe I should be an F. And I have said for a long time, I went through an exercise recently, I was like, nope, I'm dyed-in-the-wool T. I won't give you my other indicators, but I was like, I am a T, I'm a T, I'm a T. And then I took it and I read it like through a different lens, a much stronger lens, and I was like, oh God, I am an F. But I've been trying to sell my F and quantify it as a T, so I've been trying to like take that strength and retranslate it into a way that was more relevant for my other 6 or 8 team members. And not just here at Progress, I'm talking about lots of other places. Every executive team I've ever been a member of has either had no Fs on the team or one, and it wasn't me because I was kind of a closeted F. And so I said, you know what, I actually feel a lot of permission to let my F flag fly, and I'm going to do it. But I also think that that's because there's a lot of intentionality around making that okay, right? Like if you have been paying attention today here, you've heard a people theme starting with Yogesh's keynote. It was in a lot of breakout sessions, and even the fact that this session exists, I was so happy when Alyssa shared with me that this existed. I was like, you know, it's not just a theme for the sake of a theme. It's something that's really is like a river that is running through all of this programming. So anyway, I think that can be an interesting thing when that changes.
I really liked what you said about, you know, adapting to your needs. I've really found I was work from home before the pandemic, and I don't know if I can ever go back because
Absolutely not. Yeah.
I mean, the drop bys alone, you know, like it was just crushing to my productivity. I mean, like you forget about it, right? Like it's just people being like, hey, what are you working on? Right? And I'm like, the headphones are on. So
Oh, you've just given me flashbacks of the headphones being on at work and the guy sat next to me who was...
They know it's a signal to let everyone know.
Yeah, Well, keep talking to me when I had headphones on. It was also really messy, and it would always creep onto my side of the desk, and so at the end of every day I was typing up, but that's a whole other discussion. We're not opening that kind of worms.
So as much as I don't want to cut anyone off, we've got just a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure that we open up questions to the room. So if there's anything that folks would like to ask our fantastic panel here, please let me know. And if you can spare one of those mics, I will take it down amongst the people.
And if you don't ask us questions, we might start to ask you questions.
Yeah, I have no qualms of coming out there and sitting next to you. Okay? And asking questions too.
Just throw your hand up if there's anything you'd like to ask, and I will be the mic fairy. Yeah? Oh. No.
Look at my ear question.
I am going to pick
Anybody?
someone to ask a question.
Anybody?
Maybe they're not the kind of people that want to be put on the spot.
No, I'm just joking. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. I could identify with some of you, even though I'm not diagnosed with anything. I think it's also really brave that you actually went and consulted a medical professional to get to a point whereby you are diagnosed, because I think a lot of people are afraid of that. Not just how it will impact their work, but their normal day-to-day life. So I think everyone in some ways has their own coping mechanism that they work with, because they don't want to admit that, you know, they might have like a problem. So some stuff I used to overcompensate for, like someone mentioned how, I think it was you, Lucy, that you can't turn off your brain. That's how I got into chamomile tea, because I was like, I told my biology teacher, you know, I can't sleep. I keep thinking about stuff, things that are not done, as to I should wake up and really do this. And it caused me quite a lot of anxiety, you know. My work calendar is super crazy because I'm always busy. I overcommit. I over-volunteer, and it's one of those things that it's actually a problem, you know. But to protect myself, I wouldn't go and see a doctor about it, because I don't know how it's going to affect my professional career. Luckily, I work for an organization right now that is accommodating, but not the rest of the country is. So I'm from South Africa, and stuff like this, I wouldn't even be brave enough to join a panel and speak about it, because, you know, one person tweets about it, next thing, so I'm going to pick on you. You said your name was Cheryl? Cheryl. You're in HR, I'm applying for a job at your company, and you're like, you do one sweep on Google and you're like, oh, she was on this panel, Should we call her in for an interview? So I think that's another thing I wanted to actually ask. You mentioned that you're an HR professional. Like, how do people who are applying for jobs protect themselves so that they're not seen as the I don't know if I should say disease that they are diagnosed with, but they are seen for who they are and what they can do. I know that was long, sorry.
So I'm being careful not to give an overly generalized answer because it varies by region, right? So I'm, off the top of my head, I'm not as familiar with South African employment laws or practices just because we don't have an office there. But what I'd sort of give two pieces of advice in general. One is, as much as you are comfortable revealing about yourself, whether labeling it or not labeling it will help you find the best team and the best employer that will accommodate in the way that you need to. And so I'd say that that's a filter that you have the power, especially in this market, right, to determine for yourself. The second piece I would say is, if you're based in the US, you definitely have a right to accommodations, and you can state those needs for accommodations and request that by working with your HR person or your manager, et cetera. And that's becoming true of more and more places in the world, and is even truer in other places. So I would just say, in general, familiarize yourself with what your rights are, and actively educate yourself on them, educate others if they need to be educated on them, and make sure that they're enforced, so that the systems that are changing to empower as they should are leveraged. Anything you'd add, Shirley?
Just, along the lines of what Katie said, we are in a world right now where the people do have the power, right? And we talked about this yesterday on our panel. But companies are now looking for folks from all different walks of life, different backgrounds, different thinking styles to help solution for problems, right? And so to see something that's diagnosed or undiagnosed as debilitating or a disability, I think is becoming a thought of the past. And it's, again, utilizing whatever it is that you're navigating through, seeing it as a strength. It makes you different, and different in a good way. Because again, if you're working on, let's say you're in product marketing and you have dyslexia, think about all the other people in the world that have dyslexia, and you're designing a product that is for people for all walks of life. I think was it yesterday when we were in a session, the presenter was talking about, was it in that session? There's so many sessions. But there was headphones. They were talking about headphones and how headphones, the type of headphones that were being worn would not work for women with curly hair. Right? So if you have a woman with curly hair that's testing out the product and, hey, I can't hear out of this. Well, hey, let's fix this problem now before we send it out to market. And now we have to do a recall, or we're refunding money over something that could have been fixed when we were developing it. So again, it's just the power is more with all of you out here, which is a really good feeling to have, right? It's almost like it's about time. It's past due. But you want the ability to be who you are, and that does, again, increase productivity for you, which does positively impact the bottom line. So that's the business case for neurodiversity.
I think that's actually a really wonderful note to kind of close us out on. As much as I feel like we could have this discussion for hours and hours and still have so many valuable things to say, unfortunately, as the moderator, it is my duty to cut us off. So I will have the unhappy task. But I'm sure that if you had any questions we didn't get to, that these folks would all be happy to chat with you one-on-one. But thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.